Okay, happy Tuesday. It is day 2 of our Esther Bible reading plan. Matt has said he wants these videos to be 5 minutes, so we're going to jump right in and talk about today's reading, and then I want to leave you with something that you can use as you're reading every day that'll help kind of put things into context and show you how the book is structured overall. Okay, so today we jump right into the story and kind of where we left off yesterday. The king has brought all his people together for this grand feast that's been lasting forever. We're on the second feast, and he's been merry with wine, which fun exercise. Go look up in the Bible anytime these big decision makers are making key decisions after being merry with wine. And you'll see that the decisions they make are usually not very wise, not very God-honoring. It's just kind of like a fun little tidbit that the author throws in here. So the king is drunk. He's in this middle of this huge party, and what does he want to do but bring his beautiful queen, who's lovely to look at, and parade her in front of all of these people with her royal crown on her head. You should be ringing of Genesis 3 right now. This language, she's desirable to look at. He's taken her for himself already. You know, she's his queen, and now he wants to share her and give her to other people. I mean, this is like ringing of that story all over again. She's desirable to his eyes, and now he wants others to gaze upon her as well. And we're not told why. I get into this a little more in the email. There's lots of reasons you could substitute for why the queen refuses to do this thing. She refuses to come before the king. She refuses to be a prop on display. We're not told why. We just know that she doesn't, and we know that it makes the king furious. And he can't let this stand, because as his advisors point out, if she's allowed to get away with this, well, then that means that every other woman in the kingdom may come up with these crazy ideas to not do what their husbands have told them to do. And we all know how terrible that would be, right? Okay, stick with me. So the king, along with his advisors, they come up with this plan, and it has two kind of pieces that his advisors throw out to him. One, the queen should never be allowed in his presence again. And two, the king is going to have to give the queenship, her position, to someone who's more deserving, someone who will do what the king says, someone who's more humble, who's not going to be a refusing, prideful bride like Queen Vashti has been. And so that's what the king does. And he makes this edict, and he says this. He sends letters to all the provinces, and he says every man, he declares, is going to be the master of his own household. Okay. It can be hard sometimes to try and figure out what the Bible is saying when we read things like this. We don't subscribe to this. So is the Bible condoning this action? What's actually happening here? And this is what I want you to keep in mind. Every time you read about this king, pay attention to who is the decision maker. Already in this story, he's made this edict, but who really decided what was going on? It was all his advisors. He wants to be the head of his own household, the decision maker. And yet this king, throughout this story, we'll see, is one who lets everyone do whatever they want. He's a pushover. Even Esther just like holds him like putty in her hand and molds his thoughts and molds his decisions however she wants to. This is a king who is not the master of his household. He may want to be, but the story portrays him as anything but that. And I think when we look at that in the whole picture, it gives us a really kind of ironic look at what the author is trying to do here. Is the author saying that men should be the head of their households in the story? They're actually kind of poking fun at the king who's saying that he's the head of the household, and yet his actions don't bear that out at all. Okay. That's our little nugget for the story today. Lots more in the email. Let's shift gears real quick in our last 30 seconds, and I want to talk about the structure overall. So you've heard me talk a little bit in the past couple of plans about chiasms. It's these two mirroring planes that kind of work toward each other, where story on top of story mirror each other. So for example, Esther opens with these banquets, right? The king and his two banquets, they're all about honoring the king. And the story is going to close with two more banquets. this time honoring Mordecai. So the story opens with banquets, closes with banquets, but the key honoree of those are two very different stories, okay? Esther is going to become queen, and tomorrow you'll read about Mordecai who uncovers this plot and saves the king's life. And then down right before we get to the end of the story, Queen Esther and Mordecai are going to work together to save the Jewish people. So this is how the story works. You can see it in this picture here, how the structure kind of breaks down all the way until the center of the book. The center of the book is the only one that doesn't have a parallel in the other half of the story. And that's because the center is where our attention is supposed to be drawn to. Now, we'll talk more about what that center is and what it symbolizes. But as you're reading, pay attention to the structure. Pay attention to how the first half of the book, we're going to see the Jews be put into trouble. We're going to see Haman elevated. And Mordecai worked just a little bit in the background, but everything's going to be centered around honoring Haman and lifting him high. And then in the second half of the book, it's like the tables are going to be turned. And where the Jews were in trouble, now the Jews are going to start to get the upper hand. And where Haman was elevated in his pride, we're going to see him start to fall and be humbled. And Mordecai, who was humble, is actually going to be lifted up and honored. This is how this book works in terms of structure. And I think this will be really helpful as you're looking through the book, and just kind of keep your eye on where you are. Use this as like an outline for where you are in the story. And I think it will help put some color onto what you're reading. Make sure you sign up for the emails. We'll have lots more, and we'll be back tomorrow with another daily Bible study.